muting my... And we're back.
Welcome to episode 127 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And we are joined by one of Paizo's newer hires, although at this point she's been with the company for, I want to say, a year. She'll correct me if I'm wrong. Speaking of corrections, I did not double-check how to pronounce your last name, so I'm going to assume I know how to spell it, how to pronounce it. We are joined by Pathfinder developer Amanda Haman Kunz.
That is correct. Hi.
Woohoo!
Is all of that correct? You've been there for about a year?
Yes, it will be exactly a year on April 1st.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
So, Amanda, we're going to be talking about the campaign setting, which is the line that you are most working on, although we found out that that's not the only line that you work on. And obviously, you're not the only person that's working on that line, but we'll get into that quickly. But first, I want to just talk about how you got to Pathfinder, because this is your first time on the show, and I like discovering the path to Pathfinder that Paizo employees have taken. So, right at the beginning, how did you even discover RPGs and the role-playing hobby?
Certainly. So, my very first tabletop RPG was when I was about 15 years old. I played a previous edition of the game in a friend's homebrew campaign setting, and it was all just very much creative, and him coming up with the storyline and the adventure and the world that we played in, and I sort of played with all kinds of ideas and character concepts and lots of rules mismatching and things like that. And so that was when I was first getting started out, and then throughout college I played various D20 and D10 systems, and then in 2011 I was a professional reporter, had a journalism degree, and was interested in transitioning into a career that was closer aligned with what I really loved, which was RPG writing and editing. And so I actually ended up on a long path to meeting Wes Schneider at Gen Con 2011, and just sort of made contacts from there, and used my professional skills to get some freelance and work with some third-party folks, and it's led to here at Paizo.
Now, we haven't heard of a lot of people with a journalism background becoming professional RPG writers. Usually it's either from tech workers or school teachers. So,
yes.
So how has being a journalist impacted you becoming a professional in the RPG industry?
Well, I think that it really allowed me to get my foot in the door, especially at Paizo, because I know there are lots of folks who are really interested in getting into the industry, but might not have a lot of the logistical and technical skills as far as understanding deadlines and word counts and being able to write to an outline and, just sort of working in the parameters that are required for professional RPGs. And so just being able to have a business card that said writer-editor on it, I think sort of piqued people's interest, and I was able to prove that I really did know how to do those things. So just having sort of my brain already be calibrated to understanding how things work and being very detail-oriented and creative in a lot of different aspects, I think helped me sort of get started faster than maybe some others might have.
What's funny is that I'm surprised there's not more people with a journalism background that get into RPG writing, because a lot of the tone is very similar.
It is, yeah, and I think it also helped me with writing, of course, because I started out as a freelance RPG writer, and in journalism you're coached very early on how to be concise, how to convey information, how to be precise with your language, and a lot of that is really relevant to RPGs as well. because you have to know how to structure rules language, and you have to know how to make things sort of work within the parameters of the words in the language. So that definitely gave me an advantage.
I know because a lot of people I know have gotten some of their first freelance work through Paizo, and the word counts and like the hard deadlineness of some of the word count assignments is really intimidating to them.
Yeah, I think that's very natural. And so when you come from a background where you live and die by the daily deadline, and if you don't meet your daily deadline, then the newspaper just doesn't come out. That's just entirely unacceptable in a professional setting. So being used to that from the get-go is definitely an advantage.
So which is more intense, the newspaper deadlines and panic writing, or the Paizo deadlines and panic writing?
I think probably newspapers. I sort of feel like if you can thrive in that environment, then you can definitely do pretty much any other deadline-oriented environment, because in journalism you often have editors who are literally standing right behind you, and they say, you have 3 minutes, and so this is going to the copy desk because this has to get out. Yeah, so it is it's very intense.
Oh
so when all your coworkers are sweating over the Gen Con crunch, you're just like, guys, we've got an hour.
A whole hour, yeah.
So you met up with Wes, and I know your name from some freelance stuff before you got hired from Paizo. So what are some things that fans would be familiar with you for?
Sure. So after I met Wes, I also met Wolfgang Bauer from Kobold Press, and Wolfgang was also very interested in having me work with him as an editor and developer, because he needed folks like that for Kobold. And so I did a few things from him, but probably the biggest project that I did first off for him was a book called Deep Magic. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Oh yeah,
Very
I have
much.
a copy, man. I love that book.
Yeah. It was a Kickstarter that really blew up and ended up raising $126,000 and was over 300 pages as a hardcover. And so I was the lead developer and editor on that book.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and I really sort of feel like that when I was interviewing for this position at Paizo, I of course did a normal traditional resume, but when the question came up, as far as what's your experience with editing and developing Pathfinder, I could literally hand them Deep Magic and say, this is my experience. So yeah, I did that. I was also lead editor and developer on the Southlands campaign setting for Kobold Press. And we were just about to go to press when I was moving out here. So I did all of that pretty much before I started at Paizo.
Did you move before you had the job?
I moved after I had gotten hired, and I had a few days after getting here before starting.
Now, you were one of the, I believe, 3 people that were hired for the new assistant developer position. Is this something
Yes.
that they came to you with? Because I don't remember there being a whole lot of fanfare for this new job opening.
I believe that they posted a position for a developer on the website, and that was what I ended up applying for. And then just the way that the employee structure sort of worked out, they ended up doing the assistant. So yeah, I don't know how heavily it was advertised, but that's just kind of how it ended up working out.
Now, this is a good time to say that we record this show live every other Wednesday at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific time, not specific time. And we record with a live chat. So, hello, chat. Chat, if you've got any questions for Amanda about the campaign setting line or previous work, or just anything at all, please go ahead and type those questions in chat. We'll be going to the chat periodically throughout the show to pull questions from it and ask our guest here. And sorry for that interruption. Back to you all.
So you started on the campaign setting line when you were hired as the assistant developer?
Yeah, the very first project I worked on when I was hired was Hell Unleashed, which was kind of in the middle of the development cycle when I first started.
And what was your role then? What does an assistant developer do versus a developer?
Well, we worked under the main developers, so I know Mark Moreland was working with Linda Zayas-Palmer and myself to sort of explain to us what we needed, what the format of the book needed to be, and what the articles needed, what needed done to the articles, and how some of the stats needed sort of worked out. And so we sort of went back and forth with him, and pretty much just getting a handle on the reins of how the product line works and what all the requirements are, and sort of just getting used to the position. But yeah, I
Sorry.
mean, we were certainly doing full-on development work from pretty much from day one.
And now you're a full-time developer, or not full-time, but you're no longer an assistant developer, you're a developer.
Yes.
Was the idea always that you would graduate that quickly to a full developer role?
I think so. Yeah, I think that the intention was that we would eventually get up to that title, and all three of us are now developers, so that's exciting.
Speaking of exciting, we've got our first question from chat. Scott Melville asks, what do you do when you need a good idea right now?
When I need a good idea right now for something that I'm working on, one of the greatest resources that I have at my disposal is just the other Paizo developers. So you may be familiar with the Paizo developer pit, which is sort of an open cubicle. We don't have room for everybody to be in there, but there are 4 developers in there. Rob McCreary, our senior developer, Adam Daigle, Mark Moreland, and Crystal Frazier are all in there. I'm in the office over, and Linda Zias Palmer is in the office over. But whenever we need ideas, we sort of just go into the pit and say, I'm working on this, and I'm sort of thinking of going in this direction. What do you guys think? And all of the ideas that we get from all of the different directions really just allows me to sort of package something that is just so much better collectively than probably anything I can come up with on my own.
So, Scott, to answer your question, find Adam Daigle, Mark Moreland. No, I guess so. Find people that you trust, people that
Yes.
you know are creative and available.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, find other creative folks and other people who you trust and who you know are really good idea people, and just bat some things around. And sometimes in the course of the conversation, we all sort of come up with things that are a result of the collective rather than just one person's idea.
Well, with your tenure with Paizo and the products you've worked on, is there any favorites or fun ones that you've worked on that you can talk about, not the current ones?
Sure. Yeah, there's some things that I can't talk about because they're not out yet, but
Right.
I'm really excited about the way Inner Sea Fades turned out, which is the campaign setting book that's going to be starting shipping out here very shortly. I actually have a copy from the warehouse. And that was just a lot of fun because there was some fleshing out of some deities that have been pretty mysterious up until now. There was some putting together of existing material, and I feel like it came together really nicely.
Param, I can hear you. What's up?
Okay, we need to hold. We lost connection.
Oh, no.
The stream went offline for some reason.
Amanda, can you still hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can't
I heard you
hear
the whole time.
Just fine. It looks like it was just Twitch that everything.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm just waiting for it to come back up. I'm very sorry that interrupted your speech.
Oh, no
But,
worries.
nobody can hear it right now.
Oh, no.
Okay, it looks like we're back. I'm just going to give us a couple of seconds to make sure we're stable, and we are stable. Excellent. So, let's go and restate that. Start from the restating of that question so that it edits cleanly. So, what are okay? What are some of the projects you've worked on that you have been most excited about?
So one project that I'm really excited about that is it is about ready to start shipping shortly. I actually have a copy here in my hands. It's Inner Sea Fades, our campaign setting book. It's a 96-page campaign setting book that is a companion to Inner Sea Gods that deals with some of the other deities that are listed in the shorter Chapter 2 of Inner Sea Gods, and it fleshes them out with the exact amount of detail as Inner Sea Gods did for the core pantheon. So I feel like that came together really nicely.
I think a lot of people were surprised when Inner Sea Fades was first announced, especially when it was announced that it was getting a 96-page format, which would be a first for the campaign setting line, because we had Inner Sea Gods not too long ago. But the way you explain it, that it's more obscure gods, it's gods that are more name-dropped without a lot of solid information, that makes more sense. That justifies why this product exists and why someone should get excited for it.
Yeah, it certainly does. So in Inner Sea Gods, of course we fleshed out in a lot of detail our core deities, but there was that other Chapter 2 that just said beyond the core deities, and it was other gods, and they were one-column write-ups that were pretty much identical to the format of the Old Gods and Magic book. So there was a little bit of background information but not a lot. And in some adventure paths, we had done longer articles about some of those, but in some cases, that was all the information that existed about those deities. And so Inner Sea Fades is really exciting because each of those other deities now has 6-page write-ups, and there's there are 10-page write-ups. But yeah, so we have that level of detail for those deities, and we also have obediences and boons in the same way that the core deities have obediences and boons in Inner Sea Gods. So it tells you exactly how a character that worships this deity can get some specific mechanical options, and I really hope that lets people customize characters who worship deities that are beyond the core.
Now, these are obscure gods for players. They're the ones that don't get references often. But what about in the world of Golarion? Are these also acknowledged as lesser-known gods?
Yeah, so in Golarion, all these deities have the same power levels. So a 20th level cleric of Kyrgyz or a 20th level cleric of Besmara is at the same power level as a 20th level cleric of Pharasma or Sarenrae. So we don't technically call them lesser gods. They're still deities. Some of them are demigods, but they're providing the same amount of power to casters who are worshiping them. So while they aren't as widely known, maybe, or their churches aren't nearly as big as the ones of the core deities in Golarion, they are no less powerful, and they certainly aren't to be discounted or trifled with if you're going up against a worshiper of one of these folks. And we have a wide variety of alignments in this book as well. So there's something for pretty much any kind of character or any kind of NPC that you're wanting to build.
Now, do you approach these gods when you're developing them and designing new ones more from what does the world need, or mechanically what is missing? How do you approach the design of a new god or a lesser-known god?
Well, so all of the deities that are in Inner Sea Fades were existing deities. We mentioned that they existed in Inner Sea Gods. We mentioned all the way back to Gods and Magic and the previous campaign setting hardcover that they existed. There just wasn't as many details on them. So they all had alignments. They all had favored weapons. They all had a little bit of backstory about how they came into being. Whether they were always a deity, whether they were an ascended mortal or anything like that. So we had the basics, and from there it was just a matter of sort of building on what those details were and looking at what we had already said about them in, for example, back matter articles in APs, and in some cases there was more room to flesh out these folks than others. It just depended on what all existed already. But we got, like I said, we had got the same amount of information about all these folks, and lots of really cool art in this book.
So I noticed in Inner Sea Gods you had like the deities, especially the ones that were really fleshed out. You had like 3 different aspect pictures of them, and one of them was like the traditional, and one of them was like the more uncommon. Did you guys do that again with these deities?
Yes, we did. For each deity, there are 10 of them. We have a half-page opener for each section. We also have a body shot of the actual god themselves, and in some cases this is the first time that these gods have actually been illustrated. And then we have a body shot of a cleric of this deity, and it sort of ranges in what those clerics are, but we try to do a variety of different races, and showing them with a favorite weapon and showing them with the holy symbol of the deity, and sort of giving folks a big look at what this is like in our world, what it's like in practice to worship one of these gods.
We have a question from chat from Church Twinblades, who is joining us for the first time. So welcome to the show, Church.
Mm-hmm. Hey.
He wants to know, who was your favorite Pathfinder deity?
My favorite Pathfinder deity, wow. I'm very big into a lot of the religions, which is why I was so excited to work on this book. But, it really just sort of depends. I have an Inquisitor of Milani right now that I'm running through House Rebels with Crystal Fraser as the GM. And, that's a very evocative and flavorful goddess, particularly for Cheliax, and sort of her portfolio of, freeing slaves and in fairness and sort of, working against oppressive regimes. I really like that. I just really love the fact that, she is sort of a winged goddess with a really powerful looking mace and shield, and she's just visually really interesting. So she's definitely up there for me. Also a big fan of Besmara, the pirate queen, for obvious reasons. She's really cool. As far as core deities, I have to say I do like Asmodeus.
What?
Yeah.
The devil, you say?
Yeah, the devil himself.
What is it about Asmodeus? Like, after talking about, God of fairness and freedom.
Yeah.
Oh, and the devil.
And the
What
devil.
is it about
well,
Asmodeus you like?
Well, I think that, you always sort of have this dual sense that you know exactly where Asmodeus stands. He's making deals, he's working behind the scenes, but you also sort of have to be on your toes because you never know what his real aim is, and you never know, who he might align with. And we have some really interesting canon about who he's teamed up with in the past. Even though he's an evil deity, sometimes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type of thing. And so I think there's just a lot of intrigue involved with the structure of hell and Asmodeus and the archdevils and all of that.
I really like Asmodeus, especially like the concept that he might be telling the truth when he said he helped create the universe, and that particular angle could be a very fun way to take the game.
Yeah, and it's really fun, when you're writing adventures or when you're writing backstories of characters, to deal with a god who might very well be telling the literal truth, but there's something that he's leaving out, or there's something that you're not going to find out until later, that he knew about it all along, but it wasn't advantageous for him to tell you, so therefore you heard what you wanted to hear. And that's just really interesting from a storytelling perspective.
Well, it seems like you really do love the religious aspects of the game. So, do you have any advice for any GMs, especially with the new gods, or how to integrate Pathfinder's religions and gods into their games?
Yeah. So the obvious ways, obviously, are to when the PCs are in a town, or when the PCs are just out there adventuring, just sort of weave that into the fabric of the game, as opposed to only explaining, what a church is like or what a temple is like when the PCs are looking for healing, or when the PCs are looking for, an ally, a cleric of Erastil or something. I think that, sort of emphasizing that faith is a real tangible thing in Galarian, and that the gods are actually answering prayers, and that there are concrete ways to prove that, there's the existence of certain gods, and that there's this cosmic struggle going on. Always keeping that at the forefront, and emphasizing that NPCs are really relying on the gods for their power, and really buy into the faiths and really buy into the tenets. That, I think, makes it feel like it's more than just a tacked on aspect of the campaign, from a mechanical standpoint, whether it's healing or something else. That for me is really key to making a real feeling world.
Looking at the cover, right in the center, it looks like, probably in the neutral position, looks like some kind of god of inevitables with an aura of science. What is that?
That is actually Bry, and she is the Whisper in the Bronze, goddess of clockwork, invention, and time. She is neutral, you are correct, but she is goddess of constructs, and we talked about her a little bit in the Iron Gods adventure path, but we provide some specialized information about some of the special stuff that she does.
I am very intrigued by the goddess of constructs, especially clockwork. I could see a lot of characters, especially not even a character outside of Iron Gods worshipping this particular deity. That could go in interesting directions. I'm already thinking up new characters.
Now, one of the aspects of the games I really like is when you start talking about the outer planes and the afterlife. So what does her plane look like?
So her realm is actually in Axis, which is probably not too surprising, considering that she's neutral. But it's called the Citadel of Resplendent Clockwork, and it's this sort of like big labyrinthine machine of moving cogs and glass and things like that. And it's interesting that you had mentioned inevitables earlier, because that they come into play in her realm as well.
I mean, that I was just following what the art hinted at. So,
yes.
I'm not
you
surprised
picked up on that.
they are the
That's exciting.
extraplanar robots.
Right.
This is where I bemoan that you all can't do Modrons, because you as a company wrote one of the best takes on Modrons. as in your final issue of Dragon. So yeah, so that well, whenever I run it, she's going to have all kinds of your awesome Modrons.
It's all compatible, Param.
Oh, I know, but not. But we're allowed to say this. She's not.
She's allowed to reference that Modrons had been written by Paizo in the past.
Ooh, interesting. I'd never thought of it that way. But I have lost thought. Ryan, take it.
All right, Scott Melville has a question asking about atheism's view on Galarians with such... Oh, sorry. Let me word it the way he actually does. How is atheism viewed in Galarian with such proof of gods?
So I think atheism functions slightly differently in Galarian than it does in the real world. In the real world, if you're an atheist, you don't believe that there is a higher power. In Galarian, I don't necessarily think that you cannot believe that there is a higher power. Instead, you might believe that the higher powers have nothing to do with you, or perhaps you're jaded. You believe that the gods are not benevolent, or that they don't care about mortals, or that they have left mortals to fend for themselves. Maybe you have a chip on your shoulder, where you specifically had something bad happen to you that you have blamed on a certain god, and so you're eschewing their church. I think it's just sort of more of a conscious decision to not want any sort of interference from a god.
It's almost more like an anarchist views politics. They acknowledge that there are politicians.
Yeah.
Exist.
I don't think exactly. I don't think anybody in Galarian can argue that there aren't any deities and that there's no divine powers, because we've got clerics running around and divine casters and all sorts of history and lore. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you accept that it should have any influence on your life, or that you want any sort of assistance from anybody who says that they're faithful.
One of the things I mentioned when we first started talking about Intersea Fates is that this is 96 pages, which is not going to be a standard format for campaign. Oh, sorry, I got that right? You
did, yes. So it's 96.
Okay, sorry. I felt a correction coming on, and I got very self-conscious. So yeah, it's 96 pages. It's the first time that the campaign setting has a 96-page book, which means now that there are 3 more or less standard campaign setting formats. So how does that affect you as a developer? How does it affect your schedule? How do you decide how many pages a certain project deserves?
So this book really made sense for it to be 96 pages, because we've got 15 deities in here, and it's pretty much all the deities that are mentioned in the Other Gods chapter, minus Razmir, plus the 2 dragon deities, Absum and Dahak. So it just made sense to go with 96 pages. We have a pretty modular form for the articles in here. And, the format just really, it felt like it was much easier to go with the larger format to provide more information for people who want to build characters off these gods than it was to try to smush that much information into 64 pages. So, while we're certainly not changing the entire format of the campaign setting line, there may be some leeway in the future for other types of material that really screams for that 96-page format to sort of go with that. But I think that, it's really about structuring the books to have the material be more aligned with that, rather than trying to shove a whole bunch of material into 64 pages or stretch a whole bunch of material to fit 96 pages.
Well, speaking of the format of the campaign setting line, it definitely is it's one of the oldest lines that Paizo publishes, and one of the more respected, but it also is one of the more odd in its publishing schedule. So it's bi-monthly, correct?
Yes.
Bi-monthly. So you put 6 of these out a year. On average, 2 of them are going to tie into the APs in some fashion, and one of them usually ties into a hardcover in some fashion. So do you guys find it really difficult, since you seem to have less publishing opportunities for your ideas than normal?
Well, I don't know that we necessarily find it difficult. A lot of times it's actually easier because, we're doing, for example, we're doing 2 back-to-back APs set in Cheliax. So we've got Cheliax the Infernal Empire, which came out not too long ago, and it really made the most sense that if we were going to have that much adventure material in Cheliax, we should be telling people what all the cities in Cheliax are like, what's the history like, what's it like under House Throne, what are some monsters that are specifically in Cheliax, what's the timeline, what are some adventure sites, just to allow people to have the material to expand those campaigns if they really wanted to. So it makes way more sense to have a book like that connected to the Cheliax APs than it would be to have just a book that's completely divorced from that and do Cheliax like way later on. We feel like that folks would get the most use out of something like that. So while we do all have lots and lots of ideas, we really want to synergize the lines as much as we can and provide people with the information that they're really looking for when they're really looking for it.
So what makes a book a campaign setting book for the campaign setting line as opposed to a player companion, or I guess those are the only other option it could have been.
Oh, sure. So it's been a little more fluid in recent years, but the campaign setting books are very baked into Galarian. They're books that are specifically about a certain country or a certain region or a certain Galarian-specific topic, like Inner-Sea Fates or Inner-Sea God. Those are about Galarian's faiths. So you can't really play a non-Galarian game and use a campaign setting book. But with player companions, we recognize that folks are looking for lots of crunchy options. They're looking for a lot of different things for their characters that they can use, or GMs are looking for things for NPCs, and they might not necessarily be playing in Galarian. So those are options for those folks. And more we're tying options in the player campaign, or I'm sorry, the player companion into the campaign setting. So we're offering different mechanical options for certain things that exist in Galarian, but for the most part, the player companion is crunchy, and the campaign setting is storytelling and specific things that we've said exist in Galarian and expanding upon them.
Now, is the traditional line, or I guess the assumed line, that the player companions for players and the campaign settings is for the GM? Is that still a reference post, or has that mostly been outmoded?
I think that it can be, but I think more and more that players are served by the campaign setting, because if they're really wanting to, build a character that they truly understand that character's background, and they truly want to know, different traits or, other types of things. For example, how to gain mechanical benefits from worshipping Alcedo or Apsu or Besmara, then the campaign setting book has those things. So, of course it's great for GMs to flesh out their own settings or to flesh out, their own Galarian games, but I think it's also really useful for players as well to sort of feel tied into the setting and feel like that their characters are really a living and breathing part of our world.
Now, what about retreading old topics? So, for example, the first Pathfinder RPG, like the first Chronicles/campaign setting book to come out in the Pathfinder era after the 3.5 era was Book of the Damned. And then the first book that you worked on, which was earlier or late last year, was Hell Unleashed. So how often, what is the life cycle of a topic before it deserves a new revisit?
I don't think it's necessarily a set life cycle. I think it just sort of depends on what our product offerings are looking like. We had a player companion that was about Cheliax several years ago, and now we've got Cheliax the Infernal Empire that was the campaign setting. So I really just think that, we take a look at what's coming up and what we would like to write about and what folks are interested and talking about on the message boards, and we sort of take that information and we compare it to what we've already published and try to see where we can provide the most interesting, the most wanted information without, like you said, retreading old ground and sort of repeating ourselves, because that's certainly probably one of the most important things is, getting new information out there that's interesting and that folks are going to use.
And what about the idea of completing a set? Like Heaven Unleashed comes out next month, and I'm sure there's a much smaller audience for people that are looking for Heaven-based challenges than there were for Hell-based challenges.
There might be, but with Hell's Vengeance coming out, there are probably going to be a lot more evil groups than there have been in the past, and that was really sort of what Heaven Unleashed was designed to do. Like you said, with Hell Unleashed, there are lots and lots of paladins and other groups that are very much into quashing lawful evil things and things from hell and devils and all of that. But we recognize there are also going to be more groups that are interested in things, fighting angels, for example, and dealing with things like that. But we also sort of had a consideration when we were doing Heaven Unleashed that there were still going to be a majority of folks interested in good things and a majority of folks who don't necessarily want to be the bad guys. And so there's a lot of information in Heaven Unleashed about how to work with some of these celestial beings and how you might encounter them in your adventures and what sort of help that they might need from groups. And just sort of how to use them as an NPC if you want to. So there's encounters, but there's also advice for incorporating them into your campaign as something other than a threat.
And when you're developing a book like that, that kind of is to a different target than most books. Do you consciously change the tone of the book? Are there deliberate changes that you make to reflect the fact to reflect the new audience?
I think that a lot of it is covered in the introductions to the books. So I know the introduction to Heaven Unleashed sort of talks about how you might encounter these general types of things in your campaigns, and also advice for folks who are playing through adventures like Hell's Vengeance, and sort of how you might encounter these creatures as adversaries. But yeah, I think we do sort of have to know up front once we start developing, and really even once we start outlining and assigning the book, exactly what role we want it to play, and how we're going to get it in line with what the product needs to be and how it needs to be used for everybody who's interested. And so we're trying to look at things from every angle and address everything as much as we can.
Scott Melville asks, is every plane getting unleashed?
Hold everybody.
Is there another ad?
We have lost connection again. Hold on, guys. Sorry. We're getting our connection back slowly. No, it's stalled. I'm really sorry about this. This is we usually have problems, but we never have this problem.
Oh, no worries.
This feels more like Twitch's problem.
It is Twitch's, because I have no problem with you all.
Good.
Thing.
Good.
But it's just. I'm going to type in the chat so they know. Anybody? Yeah, it's just with Twitch. All right.
I haven't seen the video go down there.
It has gone down, and I have a live meter here that says, you have this much going through the server. Now you don't. Okay, it looks like we're back to being stable again, though. So, all right. So pick up back with the Scott Melville point.
Yes. Scott Melville in chat asks, is every plane getting unleashed? He can't wait for Limbo Unleashed.
So I can't speak to what all the plans are, in the nebulous future going forward, but as of right now, we don't have any other Unleashed books on the schedule.
Right. Well, if it helps, Marcus Europe follows up that it should be Limbo Leashed, actually, because Limbo is already unleashed.
That's a very fair point.
Oh, good job, guys. Actually, this is a good point to transition. Darren Caldemeyer asked earlier, if you when would you be getting a chance to work on the AP line? But that's already happened, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. I have been doing the assigning of the back matter for the Strange Ands AP, which I believe is a topic of conversation right now on the website. But yeah, so I was able to work with James Jacobs and some of the other adventure developer folks to come up with a list of articles and monsters that we were going to be putting in the back of that AP and getting those assigned, and just sort of working among all of that to get all of that handled.
Anything you can tease us with briefly?
Nope.
Gotcha.
Well, probably not.
All right.
Still
fair answer.
So I guess this matches up with the shift, Adam and Crystal taking over as developers for the AP line.
Yes. Yeah. So since Adam had been handling back matter before, and now he's going to be handling the adventures, then I've sort of stepped in to handle back matter assigning and some development work as well.
How is working on the back matter different than working on the campaign setting?
I'd say the biggest difference is that everything is sort of fairly modular and self-contained. So back matter springs from a variety of different sources. The articles are, of course, very carefully planned out, and some of the longer ones we ask for milestones from writers, and of course we assign all of the artwork. But those are very closely tied into the actual adventure to provide as much GM content as we can to help flesh out things like gazetteers or the like. But when it comes to the monsters, sometimes we come up with the monster concepts and we assign them. Sometimes we ask freelancers to pitch us monster concepts related generally to the AP's theme, and then we accept the ones that we like and we get those contracted out. And sometimes monsters are not necessarily so tied into a certain AP that they actually carry over. So there's a big variety, and it's a little bit doesn't take as long, of course, because they're shorter articles, but it definitely keeps you on your toes.
And is the plan that you'll balance between the campaign setting and the AP back matter for a while?
Yeah, I've been sort of floating around all over the place on campaign setting, been doing some back matter. I've been working with writers for the Gen Con module, and just sort of doing whatever needs to be done.
Oh, now tell us. And we just lost connection again. If you all wouldn't mind pausing briefly for just a few minutes, I'm going to go investigate, see if anybody's trying to hog my line.
Sure.
So you think this is a problem on your end, Param?
No, I don't, because I would have had craziness on your end. And we're back, so I don't have time to do that.
Sorry.
So we're back.
So you were saying the Gen Con module. Has that been announced yet? Do we know?
Yes. Yes, that has been announced. There's a product page on Paizo.com. It's called Gallows of Madness, and it is going to be coming out for Gen Con 2016. It's sort of similar in format to Plunder and Peril, which, if you're familiar with that, are 3 linked adventures that are sort of piratey adventures. This is also 3 shorter adventures, but the idea is that you can play them separately. You can play them together as an arc, and there are instructions for both of those things. And some of the back matter sort of is designed to be as flexible as possible, so that either if you want to play a quick convention game, you can run one of these and it doesn't take a lot of preparation, or if you want to run all 3 of them in any order as an arc for your home group, you can do that as well. And it's just as much of a satisfying story as any other module would be.
Now these gallows are mad, you say? How mad are
Indeed. Indeed. Well, the adventures take place in and around Serengal in Isker. And there may be somewhat of a tie to Lamashtu.
Ooh, Lamashtu. My favorite god to make all my players get the heebie-jeebies when she's introduced.
Yes, there's all kinds of fodder for grossness there, and so hopefully this module won't disappoint.
So does Lamashtu mean goblins?
I'm sorry?
Does Lamashtu mean goblins?
There will be some goblins in one of the adventures, yes.
It's kind of cheating. They're on the cover. Or at least the mock cover.
the mock-up cover. Oh, that's right. Yes. Yeah, we were tentatively calling one of the adventures the Goblin Adventure. So, yeah.
Oh. You say that with disdain. Are you all tired of goblins already?
No. I actually really enjoy goblins. I really like running and playing in all of the goblin modules. But that it's certainly not all goblins, so I didn't want to give that impression.
Mm-hmm. Now, this experiment with the 3 shorter adventures, how does working on something like that differ? Because traditionally these have been getting longer and longer and longer, to the point that you actually made the books twice as big.
Yes, indeed. So I think that in sort of an acknowledgement of that very issue that you mentioned, this is designed, it starts out at first level. The shtick is that if you play all 3 of them, I believe you will eventually get close to 3rd level, but you won't actually level up after each one. So we're still sort of working out all of the details, but we were wanting to create a module that was very much an entry-level module for GMs, so we stuck to mostly core things and things out of the first bestiary, and then we did a little bit of some other more complicated things. But the idea is that you should be able to just read through it quickly and run it on the fly. And same thing with playing through it. It's supposed to be sort of an introductory thing for folks who maybe were interested in Pathfinder and are playing a quick game, and we hope that this interests them in Galarian and in Pathfinder.
Just technically, does anyone else have crazy feedback on the line?
Yeah, I was pretty sure Lamashtu was guest hosting this show for a minute there.
Oh no, I said her name and she appeared.
Yeah, this is terrible. But
Everything you said was clear.
it's
You
a
were just echoing yourself, and
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know. It was crazy.
We have a question from Darren about the adventure. He
sure.
asks, will the 3 separate adventure format be a normal aspect moving forward in the module line?
No, I don't think so. I think that was really just sort of confined to this particular product and, meeting the need because there are a lot of folks who say they want more first level adventures. There are a lot of folks who are saying they want some shorter adventures. So that was sort of in response to that feedback. But I don't think that there's any plans moving forward to actually do that even again, as far as I know.
I think we are actually coming to a close, so I'm just going to invite people, if you have any last questions for Amanda about her experiences with the game, with working at Paizo, or about the campaign setting specifically, or really any of the things we've talked about, now is a good time to bring them in. And Amanda, you recently participated in the Humble Bundle fundraising, I don't know what to call it, just the
Twitch
live
stream.
role-playing on Twitch. There you go.
Yep, I sure did.
What are some of the highlights for that experience for you?
So both of the games that I played in were really fun, and it's very par for the course with playing with Paizo folks who are very creative, very very good players and GMs. I played in the very first session that kicked off the stream, and it was the beginner box, but on YouTube I believe it's called the Goblin Jug Band Beginner Box because the goblins that we were fighting, we found some broken up jugs and things, and the joke became that this was really a goblin jug band and we were interrupting their practice and all they were trying to do was make it big, and the joke just sort of snowballed from there. So that was really fun. Jason Bowman was our GM in that game, and then later in the day I played in another beginner box game that was GM'd by Crystal Frazier, but she sort of put her own twist on that, and I believe that the title of that game is Beginner Bizarre. That was a lot of fun.
My favorite thing about the Jug Band is that I was listening while I was also doing some work, and at some point I just lost track of whose idea it was. It just seemed like this group think was coming up with this idea for this Goblin Jug Band, and everyone was adding to it, and everyone was building on what everyone else had brought up. It was amazing to watch that creativity at work.
Yep, everybody. That's just sort of the way it works usually in the office games, is that somebody says something as a joke, and then somebody else picks up on it, and it just continues to build and snowball, and all of a sudden you have this really crazy story about something that happened in the session. So we all have a lot of fun with that.
And what's amazing is that it never gets, or at least in this particular example, it never got too far. And no one then said like, oh, but we're just fooling around. Let's get back to the adventure. It just always felt like everyone was in the moment and just like fully actualizing that one moment. It was great.
We're
and I'm
very
glad that
serious
it's available.
about
I was worried that it was just going to be a one and done thing on Twitch.
No, I believe if you go on the Twitch channel, also if you go on the official Paizo YouTube channel, all of those videos are archived and you can go back and watch all of them.
So we didn't get any last questions from chat, so then I'll turn it over to you, Amanda. What do you want to talk about?
So I don't know. Do we have anything else to talk about today?
Well, you mentioned Gen Con.
ahead,
What's your
Sorry?
con schedule look like? Are you going to be at any conventions where some of the fans might be able to meet you?
Yes, I will be at PaizoCon, and I will actually be demonstrating how Gallows of Madness is, we hope, going to be a very good convention module. So my plan is to take the developed version of the module and allow players to either choose which of the 3 adventures they want to play for that 4-hour slot, or just to roll a random die and see which one we get and then just go with it on the fly. And I'm probably going to be doing that for 2 slots, so it'll be interesting to see how folks respond to it, but that will be an exclusive event that I'll be running at PaizoCon, and then I will most likely be at Gen Con, but of course for us that's more of a panel booth situation than it is a game.
Well, any panels that you know that you'll be a part of this year?
Not yet. I don't think that we have all of our schedules, but, anything is pretty much possible at this point.
Now, is that going to be a lottery event, what you're running at PaizoCon?
Yes, yeah, all the employee events are lottery events, and I believe that you can rank what your preferences, and so you have a better chance of getting into the game they want to get into. But just all sort of depends on how the system shakes out.
The echo is back.
Oh no, no! But
So
still,
John Bastille didn't hear the name of the module. He asked if it was Cows of Madness.
oh dear.
It is not. As far as I know, there will be no cows, but you never know. Development is an interesting thing. It's Gallows of Madness.
Oh, Scott Melville took it and ran with it. He said, Cows of Madness, where you face Cthulhu, it'll be utter madness.
Oh,
Thanks for
on.
being here, Scott Melville.
Oh, guys, don't encourage Ryan with that stuff.
There's a lot of pun slinging that happens at the Paizo offices, so.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Well, actually, that does bring up, will this have any Cthulhu-y elements into it, considering that it's Strange Aeons is launching near the same time?
You mean the module?
Yes.
No, the module doesn't have anything to do with any of that stuff. Probably not, but you never know. But no, it's not meant to be a tie-in to Strange Aeons.
Okay.
So you get to choose your madness.
You do get to choose your madness, yes. So.
One with hemp and goblins, and the other one's with Cthulhu. Which doesn't actually have Cthulhu in it, by the way, guys. Or at least as we've been told.
Cthulhu.
Lovecraft.
Lovecraftian, yes.
So we did actually get a couple of questions from chat. I'm not sure what the delay is at this point, so that might have been the cause, because we got 3 of them right on top of each other.
Oh, okay.
First, Scott Melville wants to know if you have a question for chat.
If I have a question for chat. Is there anything that you guys would like to know, or anything about Paizo, or anything that I've been working on now or in the past?
All right. Second, J. Franklin 3000 says, Iblidos campaign setting book would be awesome.
Ooh, very interesting.
That's not the first time I've heard that request.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
hold, we've lost connection. It'll be back in a second. I don't know what's up with Twitch right now.
All right. Well, luckily we got through most of the interview, so if we have to cut anything short,
Yeah.
that'll just be what we do.
Yep. I hate
So anyway, we'll see what happens after the interview.
yep.
Uh,
This is taking a while to come back, guys. We're still at 0.
Oh, we're still not back?
No. I'll tell you when we're back, guys.
Okay.
We're still at 0. I am going to very briefly go make sure. No, never mind. It's back now. I was like, if it stays down long enough, I'll go make sure that there's nothing on my end causing it, but I can't see anything on my end causing it.
I'm glad you said that, because we may have come back and people just hear you like, "Aw, it's back now."
Oh, no, that's probably exactly
Yeah.
what they heard.
Can they hear us right now?
They can. We are back live.
Okay.
Sorry
All right,
for
so
the
we were
hiccups,
talking about
guys.
Iblidos and whether it deserves a campaign setting book or not.
Well, I'll have to be cagey about that and say, yeah. But as of right now, we have no plans for such a campaign setting book. And let's leave it at that. But I realized you guys asked me earlier if there was anything else that I had wanted to talk about.
Mhm.
And if we have a few minutes, I would be remiss if I didn't mention one thing.
Of course.
Sure. So I just wanted to say that it was really great working with all of the authors for Inner Sea Fades, and shooting back and forth ideas on some of the things that they had wanted to do. And we have some really awesome writers for some of these deities, but I just wanted to give a shout out to all of them. Robert Brooks was one of our authors. Benjamin Bruck, who is also an author of one of the adventures in Gallows of Madness. Crystal Fraser did Garona, which is one of my favorite deities in this book and is awesome. Thurston Hillman did our dragon deities. Brandon Hodge wrote a deity. Gwander, actually, James Jacobs wrote a Chakak, and Jessica Price did 2 of our deities in here as well. She did Savannah and Nadiri. And then Patrick Rennie and David Ross were other 2 authors. So I just wanted to say that being at the helm of this for the first time was really a great experience working with all of them, and they all did a wonderful job, and I do not think people will be disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I heard a lineup like that, you guys were like pitching how awesome Emerald Spire was.
Yeah. So we really got some fantastic, really good writers, new writers, and established writers, and everybody was very creative. Everybody was very good to work with throughout the process, and it was just really fantastic.
Excellent. Well, I think we're about ready to wrap things up then, Amanda. Why don't you let people know where they can find out more about you and more about the things that you've been working on and talking to us about today?
Sure. So all the products that I mentioned here today have a product page on Paizo.com, and I definitely encourage people to go check those out. Let us know what you think in the comments, whether it's on the product discussion or just on the forums in general. We do pay attention to that. I check that fairly frequently, and we're definitely interested in hearing people's questions and thoughts. And as far as me, I do most of my communication through my Twitter account. You can find me at Amanda Hamon. That's Hamon for the last name. And I tweet about all kinds of things related to working at Paizo and some of the games that I'm in, and just all kinds of crazy fun stuff.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Amanda. I think that we've kind of been neglecting the campaign setting line around here for a little while, so it was good to really go deep into it to talk about what cool things are happening, and especially Inner-Sea Fates. I was on the fence about it, I'll be honest, because as much as I liked Inner-Sea Magic, I don't think it's seen much play at my table. But now that I know that I'll be playing a new character soon rather than GMing, I'm looking at it from a different perspective, and I just want all the books.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, I'm sort of with you in that, I'm really into some of what are probably the lesser-known deities of the campaign setting, and so the problem with that is that there was less information about those deities, and so if you wanted to make a cleric or an inquisitor or any other character that actually gets mechanical benefits from the deities, you sort of needed to kind of come up with things based on what we've already said. But now you actually have a brand new shiny book that will tell you not only exactly what their church is like, what their faith is like, and what their worshippers are like, but will actually give you mechanical boons for worshiping them and for taking deific obedience and some of the prestige classes in the back of Inner-Sea Gods. So doing double duty there.
Excellent. Well, thank you once again for joining us, Amanda, and look forward to seeing you at PaizoCon and possibly on the show again in the future sometime.
Sure, I would be very happy, and thank you very much for asking me.
We will be right back with the news right after this.
Right. Sure. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, and if there's nothing else, I will go ahead and hang up.
Take care.
Thank you.
Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News.
And we're back.
In the Pathfinder News segment, we talk about all the latest happenings for Pathfinder, be it from Paizo, be it for the RPG, be it for all of the many other things that Paizo and Pathfinder are involved in right now. Starting with, this is something we talked about last episode with Jason Bullman. It was a very special episode, specifically to talk about the Humble Bundle. Pathfinder had Humble Bundle's very first RPG bundle, and it was an amazing success on so many levels. It had almost 77,500 backers. Param, I know you know more about Humble Bundle than I do. Do you know how many backers the typical successful Humble Bundle gets?
No, I don't know, but I know that this was really good for a books bundle.
Well, it raised $1.2 million. Now, that was split three ways between charity, Paizo, and Humble Bundle itself. But what's cool is that you, as the donor, got to dictate how much went to each person. And I think I gave an equal amount to Humble Bundle and to Paizo, but I noted for most of it to go to charity. Just seemed like the best way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I did a three-way even split on mine because, everybody deserves something from this special effort, in my opinion. But it was good, and that's one of the reasons I really like Humble Bundle. And from what I know from many interviews that I've listened to from other indie developers more involved in the video game end of things, is that Humble Bundle is usually a rousing success because it's usually books and stuff that have ended their life cycle on the sales charts, or they're on their long tail, and so it's not so much of a loss because it really is a shot in the arm, getting some money for some products that have already run out their expected lifespan in sales. So, and if you were just getting started with Pathfinder, this was like the best thing possible.
Sure, just getting the beginner box for, what was it, $15 plus shipping, or was that
$25 plus shipping? Would get you the beginner box and everything. And this is actually the first time I've ever seen a Humble Bundle do something else, which is there's usually 3 tiers for a Humble Bundle. There's the tier that you get this stuff for giving us anything you want. $1, great, here's some PDFs. And in that case, you got the core rule book and plus a few other books. We're not going to run down everything that was in the Humble Bundle because, unfortunately, guys, it just ended.
It was about $400 worth of stuff.
And then there's the tier that is like beat the average. So what if you beat the average of what everybody's bidding in, then you get this extra bonus. And then there's supposed to be a tier above that, which is the incentive that's meant to it's really the tier that's meant to pump up the average, which is usually where the best stuff is. So that was set at $15. So they were expecting 15 to be the high end of people's bidding, and the physical tier is usually like hardly anybody usually pledges in at the physical tiers, because it costs the most and it has the less cost-benefit ratio there, compared to the insanity of the others. But this is the first time in all of the Humble Bundles I have ever seen the average go above the incentive. So at the end of it, it was $16.70, a full $1.70 above the incentive to beat the average. So that's the first time I've ever seen that happen in any Humble Bundle, and it did that on day one. It also crashed Humble Bundle briefly, crashed Paizo's website, and that's still an ongoing issue because of all the increased traffic and interest in Pathfinder. Paizo's website has been slammed since this thing started. They had to put up a warning message right now that says we are experiencing higher than normal traffic.
Which might have actually been the reason that Amanda was getting a little echoey towards the end of the interview.
Right, that's what I was thinking. Is like, oh dear, she's at Paizo's office right now. Well, I know a certain internet connection that is sweating itself to death right now.
I did get in on it, but I'm not in any, I have, I think, every single book that I bought. I just don't have them as PDFs. I'm in no rush, so I'm going to wait until that warning comes down before I go and download them.
Right. I'm in this situation. I pledged in, but that was just symbolic. I don't think I'll actually get a single hit back when I enter these codes, because I've got all the PDFs too. And I didn't go for the physical box because I've already got 2 copies of that thing right now. One for each version, because they changed it, and I had to get it again. And I just didn't have a need for it. But if you didn't get in on the Humble Bundle, there is a second Humble Bundle that came in a few days after that kind of surprised us.
Yeah, so I don't know if this was something that they were planning further down the line, because like we said, the first Humble Bundle was the first ever RPG bundle that Humble Bundle's ever done. So I don't know what anyone was expecting, or if they had any metrics on which to base expectations. But Humble Bundle 2 came out while Humble Bundle 1 was still going on, after it had raised hundreds of thousands of dollars already. This is the Pathfinder Comics Bundle. It's presented by Dynamite, and this is much more in line with what Humble Bundle does.
Yeah.
Humble Bundle, I know mostly for video games and comic books.
Yeah, I mean, I've pledged in several times in the comic books, and this one is also extra sweet. And you guys, this one's still ongoing as of the recording of this podcast. So if you're in the live audience, or you're listening to it on one of the early days that this episode's up on our audio, then it is probably still have time to go get it. And as of when we are recording it includes every single issue of the comic if you pledge at the top tier, all the way up.
Everything except for the current comic that's... Oh no, Hollow Mountain.
It has those
too. In there too.
Yeah, I mean,
missed
Hollow
that.
Mountain 4 might come out before it wraps up. I don't know if 4 is out right now, actually, offhand. But yeah, all the way up through Hollow Mountain. So if you want every single comic of Pathfinder, and these things are great. We reviewed them on the show several times. These are not your typical tie-in comic quality comics. They start off with Jim Zub's wonderful writing, and then they when he leaves, they do pick it up with some other writers, including several members of the Paizo staff that keep the quality high. And this is the first time we've ever gotten to get really in depth with the iconic characters, because they have been absent in their stories up until this moment. So yeah, go check those out.
So if you at the pay, if you want, excuse me, the pay what you want level will get you the first
Hold.
6 issues.
I'm sorry.
You know what? We've still got a whole bunch of viewers, so they're obviously sticking out through these delays.
Yep. Yeah, hiccup. I'm putting it in chat every time we go out. And we're back.
If you go in at the pay what you want level, you get the entire first arc, which is nice. Every other story arc is broken up across multiple levels, so the only way to get every story arc, and they're not all story arcs, like the Goblins are all standalones, and Origins has a bookend story, but otherwise they mostly stand alone. But it's nice that if you just want to sample what the comics are like, you get Darkwater Rising, which is the first one that Jim Zub wrote. You get it in its entirety, issues 1 through 6. So yeah, if you're just curious about the Pathfinder comics, that is a great way to see just what is out there, what they are like.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And again, it's super cheap to get into. Go get it. Go get it. Oh, and also some of the things that hasn't seen print. There's some exclusive maps that haven't seen print before that they're throwing in as an incentive. So if you need some battle maps to go with all those gaming PDFs you just got in the previous Humble Bundle, here's a place to get some.
I just want to verify. I thought these were the maps that were actually physically included in the comic. This is the
Many
first time
of
they're
them
available.
are.
Yeah.
Many of them
Yes.
are, but some of them are new.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, now I have to consider if I want.
I imagine some of them might be future inclusions in issues of the comic we ain't got yet.
That makes sense. Oh yeah, the Humble Bundle bonus map, the Feast Halls, and the Infernal Sanctuary. Is it a private Infernal Sanctuary?
So you're thinking it's for her then?
No, I'm just talking about the private sanctuary, our other
Oh,
podcast.
never mind.
Private Infernal Sanctuary. I was actually considering passing on this one because I have the physical copies of everything here.
Yeah, but the maps are going to be roping you in.
Maybe.
Maybe
I
I'm
mean,
going to get them
ultimately, I
because
could pay what, $20 and get all of that stuff
Yeah.
and
I'm going to
exclusive maps. $15 unlocks everything.
I'm going to throw in because I want PDFs, and even as a comic subscriber, I don't get the PDFs.
I
Because they're
don't
published
read
through
digital comics. Nothing against them. That's
Right,
just
right.
not what I read.
But
So-
they're published through Dynamite, so they're not published through Paizo, so that's why you don't automatically get them. Which I don't have them, and I would like to, and I'm going to be traveling soon, and reading them on an iPad is better than reading them by lugging them around.
The next bit of news, we don't always cover it, but every quarter ICV2, which is like the hobbyist news site, basically, they release their top lists of sales and what every industry is doing. And of course, they listed the top 5 RPGs. And this is the list that anytime we were quoted as saying that for a period, Pathfinder was the #1 selling RPG in the world, this is the reason. This is our source, ICV2.
Right.
So right now, Pathfinder is back at #2 and has been pretty much since 5th edition launched.
Right. It was the second. 5th edition launched. We kept the #1 slot, but it was the next slot after they took it back.
Right. So it was probably just the
Pick
launch
up.
period of 5 was deep enough into that quarter that the sales, the ramifications were
Right.
only in the next month. Anyway, being #2 to Dungeons and Dragons almost makes the most sense. Like,
Yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons is supposed to be the leader of the RPG hobby. It's the only RPG with name recognition, really. You can ask my grandmother if she's heard of Dungeons and Dragons, and she will at least have heard of something about it. But what I'm curious about is how the Humble Bundle will affect the ICV2 rankings for the first quarter of 2016.
I don't know if it will, because I think ICV2 does it by participating retail stores is how they
Okay.
get their rankings. So they don't include Paizo's sales, which makes a huge chunk of Pathfinder sales don't get included. They don't include any of the digital sales through Wizards or drive-through or anything like that. Or this is my understanding as of the last time I've dug deep into this to find out that exact question for different reasons. So I doubt that the humble cells will be included into the figures. But it's odd because those cells are exact and provable. So,
Yeah.
like, this is one of the few cases where we have exactly how many was sold here. But yeah, but traditionally the things like that aren't taken into account. It's only retail hobby stores.
But what you're not taking into account, Param, is the ramifications of the Humble Bundle.
Oh.
Because we now have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people getting the beginner box for the first time. People that are just loyal to Humble Bundle and are constantly looking for a good deal. A lot of eyes were on this Humble Bundle, so a lot of eyes were on Pathfinder for the first time, and a lot of people may be getting their very first RPG product in hand with that beginner box. So it's very possible that not only was this a success for Paizo and for Humble Bundle, but it might be like a great growth for it might show great growth for the Pathfinder brand and the RPG hobby.
Oh, this means it's gonna the Paizo rooms are gonna be absolutely packed at the conventions this year.
I'm very curious. I'm curious to see what people getting into the hobby, like how many people get into the hobby through Humble Bundle.
And I have to say that the beginner box, I mean, I've played through 5th editions. I've played a whole campaign in 5th edition. I've played through their beginning material. I still say that the beginner box itself as a product is probably the most clear way to learn how to RPG of any product. Doesn't matter what you end up going into permanently, that is the best explanation and walkthrough of getting into RPGs possible, in my opinion. And I've played through a lot of beginner products over the years.
And now it's made even better because someone that's buying the beginner box now has access to something that people that were buying the beginner box before the Humble Bundle went up, they now have access to those Twitch streams that shows Pathfinder creators having fun with this game, playing those exact adventures and reminding you that it's like, yes, this is what's written in the book, but if you want to go off, if somebody makes some reference to a goblin jug band, jump on it. Everyone can get in on this. You will be able to create a moment that is exclusive to your group and that you will be talking about forever. People will not remember every single role or every single feat that every character chose, but those moments, those are the things to remember. So not only is it like if somebody's just looking for how you play this game, they've got like kind of a demo video, because Jason Bowman, when he was GMing, was specifically over explaining things and said it was for people that might not know and for people who might not be able to see what's happening on the board. But yeah, so you've got a great example of the rules and what a play session should look and feel like. And of course, it sets a very high bar for what a play session should feel like.
I mean, I wish my play sessions were like those play sessions every week.
I happen to think my play sessions are particularly clever and fun, and I also wish my play sessions were as clever and fun as the Paizo staff was putting on there.
But not all of us can pack a room full of Paizo staff.
Can't we? No, even we can't, Param.
No. We're lucky to snag them occasionally.
Yeah, we got them about one or two at a time.
All right.
Oh, Jacob Blackman's in chat, and he drew the Jug Band album cover.
Awesome! Yeah, that's a great piece of art, Jacob. For those of you who don't know, Jacob Blackman is an indie artist, an independent freelance artist who does lots of work for third-party Pathfinder products as well as other products. He also has absurdly cheap prices for his freelance work, and he produces on time, so this is an unscheduled promotion of Jacob. So if you've got a product or just want some cool character art, get in touch with Jacob. Sorry for that blatant call to your business, Jacob. Also, Jacob does not sponsor the show. We don't have sponsors for the show.
I mean, in theory, we could.
We could, but we don't.
But we don't.
We don't right now, no.
So, do you think we have time for banter, or more importantly, is the line stable enough for some banter?
Let's do one topic or two, and then we'll have to call it, because I don't trust this connection, guys. But let's give it a good effort.
All right. As you know, Param.
I know Param very well.
Fair enough. I've been running Rise of the Runelords for over a year now, and one of my goals was to run it by the book, but also like to follow what the players are doing. So I, as GM, normally am improv based, have very few notes. I'm constantly just players do something, the world reacts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, actually, I'm going to use a metaphor that I learned from the Sly Flourish Lazy GM's guide that I was on the Tome Show a week or so ago talking about. So he had a great metaphor for how a role-playing session should go, and it was about billiards. So the player is the player, the character is the cue, and the action they take and the role they make is hitting the cue ball. And they'll be shooting at a particular ball, and it will hit that ball, and it will have an effect on that ball. It will hit or miss that ball. But then there will be other ramifications. And think of every other ball on the board as other things that are going on in the world. And sometimes a ball that was unintentionally... a ball will get unintentionally pocketed. And that just means, like, well, it just doesn't make sense to check in on what's going on with the 6 anymore because the 6 ball is in the pocket. They somehow resolved that, or they missed their window to deal with that ball. That ball is no longer an issue. And slowly you start eliminating it until the only thing left on the billiard table is the black ball, is your big bad evil guy, the guy that you just couldn't attack, you couldn't deal with until now is the time.
I was that's a really great analogy, but the whole time you were doing it, I misheard you and was assuming that the players hit the cue, and then I was like, Star Trek cue, and then the whole rest of the analogy just still works.
Yeah.
But much more wacky, and that's traditionally how most of my improv sessions end up going.
Fair. No, they hit the cue ball. The all-white ball. So anyway, that is a tangent that I don't remember if I had a specific point for bringing up. But I've been running Rise of the Rune Lords by the book. And the only time we haven't been doing something in the book is if the players sank that 6 ball and it was no longer relevant. This past session, though, I went off the book.
And hold. Oh, guys. This one looks like it's a brief hiccup. Nope. We're still dead. It's trying to sputter to life. And we're back.
This past session, I went off book.
Oh.
Everything that happened in that session was completely made up specifically for that session. So what happened was the session before, I'm not going to go into details of where we are in the adventure because that could potentially spoil something big. So the session before, they arrive at a new location, and they got ambushed by a particularly powerful villain that they were not expecting.
Okay.
And this villain actually wiped the floor with them.
Oh.
And so they all just kind of gathered around and teleported out. By then, one of them had been knocked unconscious and was stuffed into a bag of holding.
Oh, that's a great place to keep a body.
Yes, it is. One of them died.
Oh, dear.
And then Kate, so Kathy's old character, who is now her spiritualist spirit. Nope, Phantom. The Phantom died, but that's fine. She can come back in 24 hours.
Okay.
But anyway, still, like, that was 3 members of the party dropped in this encounter before they all teleported out of there. Now, the thing is that it's not a random encounter. It's an encounter that happens, but it's not a plot tied. It's the encounter is not tied to the plot. It's tied to a location that they want to get past that location, which means they have to get back to that location to get past that encounter to get to the plot.
Right.
Which means that they teleported back, I believe, to Magnamar to heal up and get supplies, and then the plan was just teleport right back into it, maybe a little better prepared.
Okay.
I didn't want to do that.
Oh, dear.
It's going to happen, but I didn't want the last session, or like 2 sessions ago, to end with this one fight, and this session to begin with a little shopping and then that same fight. So I basically just stalled for an adventure where I had somebody pay for the resurrection of one of the characters, which immediately put all of those characters on edge.
Right.
Because they don't like feeling like they owe somebody. Like, who is this jerk resurrecting Kerm who's died again?
Again? How many times has Kerm been dead?
Jay says he's died 3 times. We all only remember him dying twice. I guess he's been knocked unconscious before. But it's so funny because I think Jay feels vulnerable, but he's playing Kerm the Swashbuckler, and as I've said, I feel like I'm never hitting him. I feel like any turn, he'll always be in striking distance with my bad guys. I will do a full attack on him. He is constantly parrying, riposting, and then parry, parry, parry. And he's built for crits, so he's constantly getting his grit points back. It's almost like that monk stance.
Crane stance.
Crane wing. It used to, like how Crane wing used to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that, but expanded and a little more flavor appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
I guess Crane, the flavor was
appropriate,
appropriate
too.
Anyway,
Especially
so
against
it's class
T-Rexes.
specific. Yes. So anyway, even though from my point of view he just dominates every single encounter, he has died quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so it was the owner of the arena in Magnamar, the Serpent's Run, which I had in the back of one of my comics, detailed the location. I had a map for part of the arena setup, which had a cool pit trap and a stage and a whole bunch of things, all of which, this cool setting stuff, all had rules. So when I say I went off book, I don't necessarily mean that I improvised every single stat or I rolled up anything. I just took resources that I had, tied them together through a story that I was making up on the fly. So the idea was that he was going to send somebody to attack this monster because he wanted that monster for his arena. The players were like, well, we could all go together. And he's like, no, because like he needed them to sign contracts saying that he had exclusive rights to that monster and stuff. I had a little fun with them and with a little bureaucracy. And eventually they were like, okay, so the people you're sending are kind of just bums, right? They're just gladiators who were willing to go and fight this monster. They're way out of their league because we're not bums. We're at this point the heroes of Sandpoint, the heroes of Magnamar, and we couldn't take this monster. So they challenged those guys to a fight in the arena, and it was completely one-sided. It was the lowest CR that these guys have fought in a long time, intentionally so, for storyline reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, after they defeated these guys that would have been the people going to fight this monster, they realized that they saved their lives by beating them into submission.
Oh, of course. That's the best way to save a life.
Fact, it happened. They were rewarded with the equipment that the guy was going to give them to go and hunt this monster, so, which is effectively the same equipment that they would have bought if we just did a shopping session.
Mm-hmm.
And then that session ended with them ready to go and fight the monster again.
Ooh.
So a couple of things happened. One, we got to spread out this rematch so that it didn't just feel like 50-50 booking.
Mm-hmm.
Two, instead of just them cracking open all the books and being like, what is the best equipment to kill this monster? I did that research for them, which took a little bit of control out of their hands, but at the same time, if they want to go shopping, they still can.
Mm-hmm.
But I gave them just a package deal of like, here's the stuff you're most likely to be shopping for.
Here's a BBBG killing kit.
Effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't mind, I want them to win the next encounter. I don't want it to be such a forced hand that, like, I'm not giving them scrolls of wish or whatever, but I am anticipating what they would have been watching, what they would have been buying, and I made a storyline thing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the third thing is that it was such creatively freeing, because I've complained a couple of times how just I feel so restrained by running a canned adventure, by running something that somebody else has written, and I feel obliged to run it by the book because if I make a change now, I don't want it to affect something later, and I have to keep track of the actual adventure and my version of the adventure. But that just so goes against my style, and I don't know how often. I don't know if I'm ever going to run another canned adventure path, unfortunately, because I've been enjoying experiencing the adventure, but I haven't had the thrill of GMing like I had last session in a long time.
Awesome. Well, I think what you're doing is you're maturing with the style. I think that if you kept running pre-made adventures, that you would do this more often, and you would learn to predict how you could influence things without messing things up more often. At this point, where I've run so many of them, I say maybe 2/3 of my play sessions are actually in the book, and the other third are winged or added or expanded upon to basically just to flex my muscle or to just to like tie into player specific stuff. And I often dare my players to identify which was which, and they can't. Or they get it completely wrong. I'm like, nope. The demon in the temple was in the book, and the dragon was something I added. That's not either of two things that ever appeared in anything, but yes, and it is fun, and it is. You shouldn't feel like you are handcuffed. If you do your reading, especially during the first,
I don't.
If you do your reading, especially in the first, and you do a little bit of planning and just get a little bit familiar with how these things usually go, then you can easily identify areas where you can like, oop, I can put my sandbox here, and then sidetrack and it works more often than it doesn't. And anytime it doesn't, and you do cause an inconsistency, then it becomes another opportunity to sandbox it to get your stuff back in order.
Yeah, my players 100% knew that I was going off book because for the last year and a bit, I've been standing behind the GM screen staring down for about a quarter of any given session, whereas this time I was walking around the table. I was barely behind the GM screen. I wasn't referencing everything because I just knew what was happening. I knew these characters. And it was also fun because I introduced the idea of the network, which is just a bunch of people who are constantly so they're low-level casters, but they specialize in sending message spells and stealth. And so they came into the church to get healing, and then it's like, okay, he heard the name of that monster mentioned, so he contacted the owner of the arena. The owner of the arena teleported there, and so all of a sudden there was this guy who knew a whole bunch of information, even though he was just walking right into the church. And so now I've just added this thing called the network, which is a fishing metaphor. Network is a very old word, even though we mostly use it for technology right now. It's from the 1500s, and the idea is that two fishermen with a net will be able to catch more fish than any two fishermen working alone with fishing poles. So I stand by my choice of the word network, even though nobody is questioning it at this point. Yeah, and it was fun seeing them like catch on to, oh, there's something new being introduced to the world, and having the confidence knowing I know everything about this because I just made it up. And any questions they have, I've either thought of or I know enough about how this thing should work that I can answer their questions. So that was really satisfying. So this is kind of a weird thought that I just had while you were saying that this is the evolution of running APs. For the next time I run an adventure path, for the first time ever, I am considering Shattered Star.
Ooh.
So Shattered Star has the main complaint that it is plot nil, that it's just dungeon crawl after dungeon crawl. That's basically what I did last session. I took books that had no plot but had statistics to them and had, okay, so world information. I shouldn't say that the stuff at the back of the comics has no plot. It is context that I applied, even though I put my own spin on it. Yeah, that's basically what Shattered Star is. So I will now totally just be able to turn this adventure path, use all the mechanics, and just do whatever I want with the story. And because it takes place in the same area of the world as Rise of the Rune Lords, one, I know that part of the world very well now, even better than before, and I knew that part of the world very well. And two, my players, if it's the same group, which it should be, my players know that part of the world very well, so we'll be able to we'll be making shared assumptions, and we'll be able to continue part of the Rise of the Rune Lords plot, and I will be able to be a little freer as a GM. So Param, yeah, you may, once we're done Hell's Rebels, so we're talking 2019, I may be running Shattered Star.
Well, if you keep running in Galarian and you keep running APs and Society Adventures with the same groups and stuff, you soon to start to develop something that we have at our table called the table canon, which is where all of our adventures and our adventurers eventually have been tied together or referenced, or there's been enough incestuousness there that the effects of one campaign are still rippling in the next and with the next group, to where the influence of our PFS groups, all too full of themselves halfling bard, has now rippled into the Reign of Winter campaign, and everybody's really eager for the next time that we get to do anything in the Varisian region, because there's a whole troop of goblin babies that have been being raised by the church there, and they're eager to get their hands on some goblin PCs that have story reason for existing.
Nice.
And so having your own, so by running in the same world again and again and again, in Galarian and the pre-made APs make that very easy. You have your own like continuing special part of Pathfinder lore that's just unique to your table, and your players will be extra attached to.
I have my own Goblin Jug Band.
Yes, you do.
Scott Melville has a question in chat that's relevant to this. He says, could you play select scenarios from PFS and form a cohesive story?
Absolutely.
So this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. Param, how well do you know Superman comics from the 90s?
Not at all. I was a Marvel man in the 90s.
Fair enough. So in the 90s, Superman had 4 monthly series. Effectively, he had weekly series.
Right.
And the Superman editor decided that they were just going to tell one weekly series, one continuing story in a weekly format.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant that one day you would pick up Superman issue 31, and this would continue in Action Comics issue 500 or whatever it is.
Yes.
And it would
Marvel
just
got
be
real
like-
bad about that in the 2000s.
So one brilliant thing that DC did was on the cover of every issue, they put just like a silhouette of the Superman shield, and they put a number in there. And if you just read them in sequential order based on that number, then it didn't matter what series you were reading, you knew where the storyline was going. And I would love that if all of the plot-specific Pathfinder Society scenarios had something like that. So you could actually see which ones you could play anytime, and they would just have like an infinity symbol or whatever in it, and other ones that it's like, you really should play this before that, and just create one theoretical plot that could be one massive Pathfinder Society scenario campaign.
Yeah, that would be good. There's a lot of the metadata for Pathfinder Society that I really wish was more fleshed out, and I mean that's an important part of it, because there are so many story arcs that just keep going and going and going. Now there are some, like the fan community has kept very good lists of things like this, but it really would help if it was part of it. You know, if this was like, this continues the stories of the Shadow Lodges, parts 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. But the other problem you do run into if you try to do this, if you try to follow the main storyline of the seasons, is a problem we've complained about a few different times, is that you can't follow the story cohesively, because it's like level 1, level 7, level 13, level 2, and you bounce around so much and you don't quite get it, unless you're playing several characters and you go like all G.I. Joe style on it.
You can go G.I. Joe style, or I like to think of it as going, another DC reference, Justice League and Teen Titans / Young Justice. So you've got your main characters, you can look at them like that, or anyway, your high-level characters, your guys that are 8 through 11, they'll be running the high-level stuff, and then their sidekicks, which could just be lower-level versions of those same characters, or it could just be companion characters. PCs would have the option to do it, and if you do it this way, you wouldn't be able to get PFS credit for it. This is just if you want to make a campaign out of that material and you don't want to mess around with the stat blocks. So basically, if you had 2 squads or maybe 3 squads of different levels, so that you can constantly be jumping around between them, and then just the idea that everyone is reporting back exactly what happened, filling in all the details so that a player can feel like they are not using metagame knowledge. They somehow gain this knowledge, even if they're jumping between their different groups within this one campaign.
Yep. It would be fun, if only because it would be, if anybody's participated in society long enough, you realize that this is the worst day job ever to have, is being a society agent. I mean, you show up in a place, some grumpy person gives you a suicide mission, you go to talk to NPCs that don't want to have anything to do with you. It makes for very fun storytelling, and it's one of the charms of it. But man, it's so much different than most adventures I end up playing.
Scott Melville asks, they don't make a list. So, I mean, yes, they've got the list of all of the adventures, and if it's like specifically a sequential storyline, it will have part 1, 2, and 3 there, and they'll usually be released within 2 or 3 months of each other. But no, there is no just massive list saying like, this is the optimal order to play these adventures in if you just want the plot.
Right. Like, say if you were trying to follow the rise and fall of Grandmaster Torch, and you want to do all the Torch adventures, there's no big, like, the fan community keeps lists, but like the Paizo themselves doesn't make it easy to follow. Like, this is the storyline that leads up to the Shadow Lodge and then leads to the fall of the Shadow Lodge, etc.
That is probably the perfect example, Param, because he's a guy that shows up often enough, and his status as a character changes depending on what adventures you've played in. Because I've played adventures where Torch was really messing with us, and then later on played an adventure where we're meeting Grandmaster Torch. It's like, this doesn't. This only makes sense if Pathfinder Society is all time travelers,
Right. And then
and we are told not to mess with the timeline.
I know. But that could also be a fun campaign setting.
Yeah, sure. That was Tina's theory. She was trying to justify why, how to make sense of those inconsistencies. All right, Param.
Mm-hmm.
The line seems pretty stable. Let's talk about Ultimate Peasant.
Okay, so if any of you all were watching our recordings or listening to our recordings of Gen Con this last year, I think it was during the developers panel, a joke got thrown up. It was like, hey, wouldn't it be a cool idea if we could play, what should be the next book? And the other one was Ultimate Peasant got brought up and then joked about for, I think, that panel, and the next panel kept the joke up. And at first we all laughed, and I've been sitting here thinking, that with that's not actually wouldn't actually be a bad book. I kind of wish Paizo would kind of explore that angle. Not the peasant. I mean, the peasant could be part of it, but I did talk about, how I thought the Ultimate Adventure would be a great book, and that was my prediction, and then a lot of that is coming true in Ultimate Intrigue. A lot of the ideas that I wanted in that book is they are going to make a book, and I'm really happy about that. But then I'm sitting here thinking Ultimate Campaign explored this a little bit, but I've been playing a lot of games lately, and a lot of games like Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley that just came out, and World Dawn and Banished, and I'll explore the idea that there's still room for an RPG and mystery and relationships and effort and stuff that doesn't involve the combat side of things, and there's countless RPGs that do handle this, but Pathfinder could have a whole system added, or a book that let us play not sword and sorcery, but still have fun in Galarian, with Ultimate Peasant or whatever they choose to call it, and get into the living the life and making the world work of Pathfinder, that we are the kind of people who need to hire the adventurers to help us or to get things done. And if you read lots of fantasy literature, including a lot of Pathfinder literature, and then books like Imager. Oh man, I love Imager. Is a great book about this because it deals with the concepts of guild crafting and how life like that works, and has mystery thrown on that, and doesn't revolve around a lot of slaughter, killy, dungeon grinding fests, but still is every bit gripping and have the same elements of story that Paizo likes to explore in their books. And I think it would be cool. Well, that's just what I think.
So funny enough, Jacob Blackman points us to Misfit Studios' The Adequate Commoner, which is the deal of the day on RPG Now.
Oh,
so this is a $12 PDF normally. You can get it for $7.17.
I might have to go check that out.
But the cover is a dude standing on a giant dragon's neck. So I'm not sure if it's the...
if he's the dude sent to clean up the dragon that the PCs left in the middle of the town, then this makes sense.
Actually, that's Marvel had a comic called Damage Control. And
yes, that was so good!
I love Damage Control. It's just the people that go around and clean up after the superheroes and fix the collateral damage and make sure that insurance claims are accurate and that, you can be insured against acid attacks and stiltmans.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of different things that I like about this. The way you've played it out, you said you can hire you're the guy that needs to hire the adventurers. How do you find an adventurer? If you are just a dude who owns a farm who maybe has to go 2 hours to get into town, what are the odds that you just come across an adventurer? So what do you have to do? That's your adventure, finding an adventurer to deal with the rats in your basement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and also that's what the strange old man brokerage firm takes care of as he sits in the corner of the tavern.
That's how that works.
The creepy and McDougal. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole thing. So, I mean, when and think about how you have a lot of fun in your campaigns during the adventures where smashing things with the metal pointy objects isn't the answer. Imagine setting up adventures and playing through them where even the option. Like you can't take on these ogres. You can't do anything about this group of bandits or thugs that have muscled in wanting protection money for your tavern shop or your seamstress or your tinsmithy, or your society for the political advancement of halfling rights in Absalom. It's just cool. I mean, this isn't new ground. Other RPGs have been exploring this for years. But if you go and look at Twitch, we're on Twitch right now. One of the top games going right now is a farming simulator where you still have all these plots and stuff, except for the main thing he handles is a hoe.
Phrasing.
Axe. Or, this isn't helping.
Yeah, farm tool.
Farming, yes. Lots of horses and tomatoes.
What I could see is this being a system that you can tack on to your Pathfinder game, and having almost like anti-mythic.
Yeah.
You can have 10 levels or 10 tiers of peasant, and the idea is that you could just play 10 straight tiers of peasant, having just one single level of an NPC class, and that's the entire campaign. Or you could run this campaign concurrent to an adventure, but you once you fulfill these 10 tiers, you're awarded a free level. So basically, by having a day job, by being the guy that goes out to adventure, kills that goblin that's been ruining the neighborhood, but then you come back to the day job and you have to still live your life. Living your life advances your career. You are gaining experience. This is sort of, I'm taking how I would run the kid rules differently, because the kid rules in Ultimate Campaign really are not satisfying.
No, they aren't.
And Alex Agunas, who is not in chat today.
No, Alex!
Who is not in chat today.
I said, no, Alex!
Oh, okay. You just said it so announcing. You seem so happy.
This is, me and him are one on this front on this, actually. I agree with him in all of his stances on the youthful characters, and yes, I think.
Yeah, and I agree too. Harry Potter, have you heard of it?
Yes.
It's quite popular. In fact, the entire idea of teenagers having to rise up to the occasion, kind of a popular series of genre of books right now.
Yeah.
And yet the assumption is that even a first level character is a mature adult who is starting his career. So you could apply the same idea to being a kid, where it's your teen years from 10 to 20, you are playing this out, and at 20 you'll be able to start your adventures, and these 10 levels, 10 tiers, whatever, however you want to look at it, help you as an adventurer. That it's more than just backstory. Somehow mechanically it can be applied to your character, and that way you could and you can do that same thing going back and forth. So you could be the kid adventurer, you could be Bobby the barbarian, who in his downtime is just being a kid and is eventually growing up, but he's answering the call of duty and going out there and swinging his magic club with his pet unicorn.
I'd like to think that Paizo agrees with us on this, because the iconic kineticist, Yoon, is 7 years old and does not use those rules.
No, she does not. What rules did they end up going with? I don't think I've ever looked. She just
set it up like a normal character.
Huh, okay, and people are just saying kid?
Yeah, age 7. Con, I forget what her con is. Powers, set things on fire with her brain. Effective.
So there's a couple of comments from chat. Scott Melville wants to know our opinions on the downtime rules. So we are getting dangerously close to the no question segment, which is the next segment of the show.
I do not think we have stability to do that.
Okay, so then, Scott, how about we give you a brief answer right now, but this is something that we could handle in a segment another time. So I'll add that to the no question segment we had outlined, which we will do in another episode when we have more stability.
Yep.
So, Param, your feelings on
I love them.
rules?
I love them. I use them all the time.
Really?
Yeah. In my normal game, it's becoming super important because it's our urban adventure that takes place almost entirely in the city of Almas in Andoran. and my players love owning businesses and running things. And I got a big old rule book that says how you do it. And then when they got the city, that was the one part they loved about Wrath of the Righteous, is when they got to build up that city from scratch. And like when you get that city, it's a complete ruin, and you have to use the downtime rules to build it back up again. And they were having fun with, okay, I'm going to start a temple, and I'm going to start training a guard regiment, and I'm going to go over here. And man, with that metagame, they loved it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the strongest parts of the game that Ultimate Campaign added, and one of the best uses of that book.
See, I found it too crunchy. I would like something that's a little bit like, my ideal use of downtime is the wizard is going off to craft wondrous items, and I want a little something for the other players to do, but I don't want to say, like, so what do you do? And then they go off and they'll find adventure hooks, then they'll want to go on those adventures, and then the guy who's making the caster who's crafting magic items is like, fine, I'll craft these another day because now we've just got hooked into another adventure. That's happened so many times in my campaign. So the alternative is when they go off and are doing their own thing, just to tell them you find nothing, and you will find nothing until he is done crafting. And that's boring for everybody. So if it's just a nice mini game that it's like, okay, so that guy's crafting, we have 7 days. What am I going to do for these 7 days? Roll 1 or 2 dice, tell a little bit of a story that's flavors the character, flavors the world, but ultimately doesn't have a huge impact. That's how I want downtime to work. But just the number of roles, like, it gets super involved, and I remember there also being adventure hooks built into the downtime, so it just felt like the same problem I have, plus more crunch.
Right. Well, on the flip side, I mean, if you want to make that a major focus of your game, it's the same reason that we like Pathfinder's tactical combat, because we like tactical combat as part of our game. If you're wanting to introduce, like, if you're wanting to really seriously make this part of the cycle of your play days, the crunch helps make that important. So it's not good for every session, but like I said, in my games, a good 1 out of every 2 play sessions might be entirely devoted to not the adventure, but sort of just the straight role playing and business running and that stuff. And they love that as much, if not more, than when it's time to jump into the dungeon.
Now, Church Twin Blades also has a comment. I think it was actually in reference to something we said earlier, but it still applies. Great if you have a base of operations, but if you travel a bit, it's not at all fantastic.
No, that's
or
it.
It's not.
This does not work unless you have a base, and neither of these ideas really do. If you're going to tie yourself down, you need to have a place to tie yourself down to, which also means you have to make a very interesting and evocative place that you're going to visit again and again, and not be boring. So it's, again, that's a little bit extra weight on the GM, as opposed to just your typical travel and meet new sites that I don't need to care about next week because he's either dead or 500 miles in the other direction. Yeah, it doesn't work. He also mentioned that it's great, a tavern in the middle of a lawful good paladin city, and I said, do not diss the Fickle Friar. They have great drinks.
It's a great name.
Yeah. It's great. Downtime rules are a great foundation. It's just that that's meant to be run as a supplement to adventurers, being adventurers. I would just want to be more rules for the assumption to be this is actually the focus, the meat and potatoes, which would need more crunch if that's what your roles and challenges are going to be based on. You're not going to need all the rules in the combat chapter or the spells chapter. You're going to need to basically just be going, it's going to need its own crunch and system that's even more crunchy than downtime, if that's going to be like the whole basis of the campaign. I mean, social combat's going to come into play a lot, so ultimate intrigue's going to be used, that sort of thing. I mean, I guess you could piecemeal it together with some of the things, but I would love to have a focus book.
Well, we may. We've got the adequate commoner. Seriously considering picking it up and hopefully reviewing it for next episode, and parts of next episode then be a continuation of this episode. We'll have a little more talk about the downtime system, or maybe not, since I think maybe we have covered enough ground. Anyway, we'll put that on the table as a possibility. And I'm curious. It comes... Actually, Jacob, you didn't specifically recommend it. Is this something that you've read? Do you know if it's a book that's worth reading, or do you just know that it was topical to what we were talking about?
And is the art suspiciously like your art style? I kid.
Is it?
So if you did work on this, that'd be cool to know. But it sounds like a good book, and like I said, it's not a new idea at all. There was an adventure that I had a lot of fun with at the tail end of 3.5 when we were starting up a new campaign. We ran an adventure called Heroes Are Made Not Born, and the first part of that is you roll a 1/2 level NPC class character, and then the problem is the heroes got killed, and so you all have to deal with the ogre that's asking for ransom from your town, and you have to figure out how you're going to deal with that. And then eventually, when you level up, you got to take your real character class and go on with adventuring. But it was a fun little experiment and a very fun adventure. I highly recommend. Goodman Games put that one out. It was one of their Dungeon Crawl Classic line. And
Jacob, go ahead.
Oh, okay. You were saying something about Jacob?
I was just, well, you finish your point, and then Jacob answered my question.
Oh, and it's 3.5, so it's Pathfinder compatible if you guys want to go check it out and run it and use it. I think it's on Drive Through RPG.
Cool. So, Jacob's, we just lost the connection, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Then we'll definitely wrap up right after this.
We will. If it comes back. And it's coming back. And it's
Coming?
And it's gone. Darn you, Internet! Come back. I cast Cure on the Internet. It's not working. And we're back. We're for real this time.
Jacob answers my question in the chat. He says that he has a copy. He hasn't had a chance to read it yet, but he does have a couple of pieces of stock art on the interior.
Oh, yes. Well, he has no control over who buys his stock art.
Doesn't he? No, I guess not. Anyway, connection's getting a little bit fiddly, so I think we're going to wrap things up right after this.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
And we're back.
Thank you for joining us for episode 127 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Before we go, a couple of things we would like to bring to your attention. First of all, thank you, Amanda Hamon Kunz, for joining us, letting us know how cool the Pathfinder campaign setting continues to be, even though some of us are not reading those books as often. I think that when I'm GMing a canned adventure, I find I'm way less interested in the campaign setting line, Param, because I don't need to pepper my world. I don't need new information, especially Rise of the Rune Lords. Like, so much information is right there.
And we've cut out.
Have we?
We have.
Curses.
Oh, gosh. And we're down. We're down.
Huh. What does that mean?
It means... And we're back.
Ah, good.
Sorry about that, guys. Let's wrap things up for real this time.
Where should I pick up?
Let's just get as quickly to the wrapping up part as we can.
Thank you for joining us for episode 127 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. And thank you to Amanda Hamon Kunz for joining us and talking about what's cool about the Pathfinder campaign setting at this time. Before we go, a couple of things to bring your attention to. This was a link that Darren Caldemeyer, who was our PaizoCon Countdown correspondent, our official PaizoCon Countdown correspondent, he posted a link to a Google Doc that's called the Paizo Adventure Path Survey. Now, it's not affiliated with Paizo. This is not a survey that Paizo is running. It's a survey about the adventure paths for Pathfinder that Paizo has published. And the idea is that if somebody is new to the game or somebody is just interested in running an adventure path and doesn't know where to start, they'll read over the survey results and try and find the adventure path that best suits what they're looking for. So this will be in the show notes because it's a Google Doc, so it's just a bunch of gibberish letters. But if you search for the Paizo Adventure Path Survey, or if you're friends with Darren Caldemeyer, just look him up on Facebook and see if you can find the link there. I will post the link in chat. And of course, a reminder that PaizoCon is coming. It is in less than 100 days. Darren, are we disconnected again?
Yeah, but let's finish it for the recording.
Okay. Oh, so, okay. PaizoCon is in less than 100, less than 100 days. May 27th to the 30th. That is a Friday to a Thursday. No, that is a Friday to a Monday.
Which is such a weird con.
Well, the Monday, I believe, is... Oh, Darren Caldemeyer's in chat. Hey, Darren, how many days
Darren.
until PaizoCon, buddy? While he answers that, yeah, I believe Monday is a vacation day. It's a holiday of some kind. I think. Anyway, that's something that people can look up on their own. We're kind of rushing to finish this off because we've lost connection like 5 times just doing this wrap-up segment.
So we're just
which
doing
is
the
shortest
recording now.
segment.
Yep.
So until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Stop streaming. We came back just as I hit stop.